Captain Hana pressed her fingers against the cold metal wall of her ship. The small research vessel floated silently in the dark space between two distant stars, far from any council patrol routes or busy trade lanes. This was exactly where she needed to be for what she was about to do. 3 years had passed since she first heard the whispered rumors. 3 years of careful investigation and dangerous questions. 3 years of following leads that always seemed to disappear just when she got close to the truth. But tonight was different. Tonight she had finally broken through the first layer of the Council's most classified database. Her hands shook slightly as she activated the advanced hacking program she had bought from a Zalarian tech smuggler. The device hummed to life, casting blue light across her worried face. The Council would execute her if they caught her doing this. But she had to know the truth. She had to understand why her own species was treated with such strange fear and respect throughout the galaxy. The screen flickered and suddenly she was inside the Forbidden Archive, the place where the Council kept their darkest secrets and most dangerous information. Most of the files were locked behind security protocols that would take years to break. But she wasn't looking for most files. She was looking for one specific entry. Her search program worked quickly, scanning through millions of classified documents, looking for any mention of the keyword she had discovered. During her investigation, the ghost of Titan-human anomaly. Vorthan retreat. These phrases had appeared in old intelligence reports before being scrubbed from the official records. Then she found it, a single file buried so deep in the system that it had been forgotten by even the Council archivists. The entry was corrupted, damaged by years of attempted deletions and security purges, but enough remained to make her blood turn cold, classified beyond top-secret Council Directive 2847, Subject Human. Designation, redacted, status existence denied, threat level. Galactic recommended action, total information purge. The file continued, but most of the text was scrambled or missing. What she could read made her feel sick. The document talked about a human who had committed acts so terrible or so impossible that the Council had decided to erase him completely from history. Not just his military records or his personal files. Everything. Every mention of his name. Every record of his existence. Every trace that he had ever lived. But why would they do this to one of their own heroes? The official history book said that humans had fought bravely in the Vorthan War alongside their alien allies. They had been good soldiers, following orders, and helping to achieve victory through teamwork and cooperation. So why was there a human whose very existence had been deemed too dangerous to remember? Hana tried to access the deeper files, but immediately alarms began screaming through her ships. Computer systems' red warning lights flashed as automated security programs attacked her hacking device. The Council's defensive protocols were trying to fry her entire navigation system just for attempting to read more. She quickly disconnected her equipment and powered down all non-essential systems. Her heart pounded as she waited in the darkness, listening for any sign that Council patrol ships had detected her intrusion. Minutes passed like hours, but finally her sensors confirmed she was still alone. As her systems came back online, Hana stared at the small amount of information she had managed to copy. The file mentioned something called the Titan Incident and contained references to tactical approaches that violated standard military doctrine. But most interesting was a single line that had survived the data. Corruption Admiral designation, redacted, demonstrated capabilities beyond acceptable parameters for allied species. Integration into standard command structure deemed impossible. Recommend immediate reclassification and isolation protocols. An admiral. The banned human had been an admiral in the war, but the Council had never mentioned any human reaching such a high rank in their military. The highest-ranking human in the official records was commander level, and even they were always described as junior partners in larger alien-led operations. Hana began searching through her personal collection of war documents. She had spent years gathering every piece of information she could find about humanity's role in the great conflicts. Most of it was boring routine reports about supply runs and minor skirmishes, but now she started looking for gaps. Places where the timeline didn't make sense, or where major victories seemed to happen with no clear explanation. What she found made her question everything she thought she knew about human military history. The Vorthan Empire had been the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. Their technology was superior. Their tactics were proven over thousands of years of conquest, and their military leaders were considered the finest strategic minds in known space. When they declared war on the Council, everyone expected a quick defeat, followed by surrender, but somehow the war had dragged on for 3 years. Somehow the unstoppable Vorthan war machine had been stopped and eventually forced to retreat. The official explanation was that the combined Council fleets had worn them down through superior numbers and better cooperation between species. Yet when Hana looked at the actual battle reports, she found something strange. The major turning points in the war all seemed to happen in sectors where human ships had been operating, but the reports never explained exactly what the humans had done. They just mentioned that Vorthan forces had suddenly retreated, or that enemy supply lines had been mysteriously disrupted. Even stranger was the pattern of Vorthan military communications that had been intercepted during the war. At first their messages were confident and boastful, talking about easy victories and weak enemies. But as the war progressed, their tone changed. They started mentioning things that made no sense. References to ghost ships and impossible tactics. Complaints about enemies who fought without regard for military tradition or proper battle conduct. The final intercepted message before the Vorthan retreat was the most disturbing. It was a transmission from a Vorthan admiral to his high command requesting immediate withdrawal from all human-controlled sectors. The reason given was simply that humans were not fighting like any known species in the galaxy, and that continued engagement would result in unacceptable psychological damage to Vorthan forces. Psychological damage. What could human forces have done to terrify the galaxies? Most feared warriors. Hana realized she needed more information, but she also knew that continued hacking attempts would eventually be detected. She needed to find someone who had been there during the war, someone who might have witnessed what really happened as she set course for the nearest neutral port. Her mind kept returning to that corrupted file. The Council had gone to incredible lengths to erase one human from history. They had spent decades hunting down every reference, every document, every trace of his existence. But they had missed something. The file was still there, damaged, but readable. And if there was one file there, might be others. She didn't yet know the name of the band admiral, but she was going to find it. And when she did, she was going to discover why the most powerful government in the galaxy was so afraid of one human that they had tried to pretend he never existed. The truth was out there waiting in the dark spaces between official records, and Captain Hana was going to find it no matter what the cost. Captain Hana stepped off her ship onto the metal walkway of Nexus Port. The massive trading station buzzed with activity as hundreds of different alien species moved through the crowded corridors buying and selling goods from across the galaxy. This was perfect neutral territory, where council law meant nothing and information could be bought for the right price. She had spent 2 weeks tracking down leads about her mysterious band admiral. The trail had led her here to this lawless place, where old soldiers and retired spies came to drink away their memories. Her contact had been very specific about where to meet him. Level 7, Section C, Booth 12 in a cantina called the Broken Hyperdrive. The cantina was exactly what she expected, dark, smoky, and filled with beings who wanted to be left alone. Alien music played softly in the background while creatures from a dozen different worlds sat hunched over their drinks. The bartender was a Catherian with 6 arms and glowing yellow eyes who barely looked up when she entered. Hana made her way to the back corner where Booth 12 sat in shadows. A hooded figure was already waiting for her. She could not see his face, but his posture suggested he was old and tired. The kind of being who had seen too much and lived too long. She slid into the booth across from him and was about to introduce herself when he spoke first. "You are asking about the wrong human." His voice was mechanical, filtered through a universal translator, but the words hit her like a physical blow. The council did not ban his name because of what he did. They banned it because of what he proved. The figure reached into his robes and pulled out a small data chip which he placed on the table between them. His movements were careful, deliberate, like someone who had spent years learning to hide his intentions. 50 years ago, when the Vorthan Empire was crushing everything in their path, The Council was ready to surrender. The great species of the galaxy had accepted that some beings were simply superior, that the natural order meant bowing to the strongest. That was how things had always been. Hana leaned forward, her heart racing. This was more information than she had found in months of searching. Forthan had conquered 17 different civilizations in less than 2 years. Each species had fought according to their military traditions, using accepted tactics and proper battle formations, and each species had been defeated quickly and efficiently. The Vorthan way of war was perfect. It had been tested across the galaxy for thousands of years, but then something changed. The figure paused and seemed to look directly at her, even though she could not see his face under the hood. One human changed everything. What did he do? Hana whispered. He showed them that humans do not follow the natural order. While every other species in the galaxy has limits, boundaries they will not cross. Humans have something else. They have the ability to become monsters when they need to, and angels when they choose to. The figure pushed the data chip closer to her. The Council feared that if other species learned this truth, if they understood what humans were really capable of, the entire power structure of the galaxy would collapse. Every alliance, every treaty, every agreement was based on the belief that all intelligent life followed certain rules. But humans do not follow those rules. Hana picked up the chip, her hands trembling. What rules? The rule that civilians are not targets. The rule that surrender ends conflict. The rule that there are some prices too high to pay for victory. The rule that military leaders care more about their own lives than about winning. Every species in the galaxy accepts these limits. Even the Vorthan, for all their power, followed a code of conduct. The figure stood to leave but paused. Your band admiral threw away the rulebook. He showed the galaxy what total war really looked like. What happened when a species decided that nothing mattered except making the enemy lose. He proved that humans were not just another member species. They were something fundamentally different. Something that could not be controlled or predicted. Wait. Hana called out. What was his name? The figure turned back toward her, and for a moment she thought she saw something glinting in the darkness of his hood. Eyes perhaps, or the reflection of old tears. His name was Tai Min, and he was the most dangerous human who ever lived. Not because he was evil, but because he showed everyone, including the Council, exactly what humanity could become when pushed to their breaking point. The figure walked away, disappearing into the crowd of aliens, but his voice echoed back to her one final time. The Council was right to fear him. They were right to erase his name. Because if other humans knew what he accomplished, if they understood how much power they really had, they might start asking why they have accepted such a small role in galactic politics. Hana sat alone in the booth, staring at the data chip. The cantina continued its normal business around her, but she felt like she was in a bubble, separate from the rest of reality. Admiral Tai Min. The name felt strange on her tongue, like speaking a forbidden word. She thought about everything she knew about human military history. Humans had always been described as brave but conventional. Good soldiers who followed orders and worked well with others. The perfect junior partners in the great alliance of species. But what if that was all lies? What if humans had capabilities that had been deliberately hidden from them? What if their real history had been stolen from them? The bartender approached her table, his 6 arms carrying a tray of empty glasses. You look troubled, human, he said in accented English. That is not good for business in a place like this. She looked up at him, studying his alien features. I am researching old military records, trying to understand what really happened during the Vorthan War. The Catherian made a sound that might have been laughter. You will not find those answers in any official record. The winners write history, and sometimes the winners prefer certain truths to stay buried. Have you ever heard of Admiral Tai Min? Bartender froze, all 6 of his arms stopping their movement at once. His glowing eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Where did you hear that name? From someone who knew the truth. The Catherian looked around the cantina, as if checking for listeners, then leaned closer to her table. I was there, child. I served on a council support vessel during the final phase of the war. I saw what your admiral did to the mighty Vorthan Empire. Tell me, he was not fighting a war. He was teaching a lesson. The lesson was simple. Humans do not lose. They may die. They may sacrifice everything they have, but they do not accept defeat. And when you corner something that refuses to lose, you discover what it is truly capable of. The bartender straightened up and resumed cleaning his glasses. The Vorthon learned that lesson well. They have never attempted another conquest since then. Some scars run too deep to heal. Hana clutched the data chip tighter. What kind of lesson? The kind that changes how an entire galaxy thinks about power. The kind that makes even the strongest species check over their shoulders. The kind that gets names banned from official records. She left the cantina with more questions than answers, but also with something precious. The first real clue about Admiral Tae Min and what he had done to terrify the most powerful beings in the galaxy, back on her ship. She inserted the chip into her computer and began to read. The files that appeared were unlike anything in the official records, raw, unfiltered reports from the war that painted a very different picture of humanity's role in the conflict. And at the center of it all was one name that appeared again and again, Admiral Tae Min, the ghost who had haunted the Vorthon Empire and apparently still haunted the Council 50 years later. Captain Hana sat in her quarters aboard her research vessel, staring at the data chip she had received from the mysterious informant. Her hands shook slightly as she inserted it into her personal computer. The files that began to load were unlike anything she had ever seen in the official Council archives. These were raw intelligence reports filed directly from the battlefield during the Vorthon War. No censorship, no political editing, just the honest, terrified observations of military officers who had witnessed something they could not understand. The dates on the files showed they had been compiled during the final 18 months of the conflict. The first report came from a Zalarian intelligence officer stationed with the Third Council Fleet. His words painted a picture that contradicted everything Hana had learned about the War Day 847 of the conflict. The Vorthon advance has stopped completely for the first time in 2 years. Our long-range sensors show their fleet formations, holding position in the Kepler sector, making no attempt to push forward toward Council space. This makes no tactical sense given their overwhelming superiority in ships and firepower. Something has changed in the last 6 months. The Vorthon military. Communications that we intercept show increasing confusion and concern among their command structure. They are reporting equipment failures, supply shortages, and morale problems. But our intelligence suggests none of these issues should be significant enough to halt their advance. Most disturbing are the references to what they call ghost attacks. Vorthon patrol ships are disappearing without sending distress signals. Supply convoys are found drifting empty, with no signs of battle damage. Communication. Relays are going offline across entire sectors with no explanation. Hana scrolled through dozens of similar reports, each one describing impossible events that the Council intelligence officers could not explain. Vorthon battle groups would arrive at their destinations to find nothing but empty space and radiation signatures. Their supply lines were being systematically destroyed, but no Council forces were operating in those areas. Then she found the reports that mentioned human involvement. The Baiduri human fleet under Admiral designation unknown has gone completely dark. No communication with Council command for over 4 months. Our attempts to establish contact have been ignored or actively blocked. Last confirmed position was near the Jupiter system. But long-range scans show no human ships in that area. What troubled the intelligence officers was not that the human fleet had been destroyed. They had considered that possibility and marked it as acceptable losses in the larger war. What troubled them was that Vorthon casualties were actually increasing during the same period when human forces had apparently vanished. The pattern became clearer as Hana read through more files. The human fleet had not been destroyed or retreated. They had simply stopped following conventional military doctrine. They were operating independently using tactics that no other species in the galaxy had ever attempted. A report from a Council rescue ship painted an even stranger picture. We responded to a distress call from the Vorthon heavy cruiser, Domination Eternal. When we arrived at the coordinates, we found the ship intact but completely abandoned. The entire crew of 800 had evacuated in escape pods, leaving behind a fully functional, warship. When questioned, the Vorthan crew members were in a state of psychological shock. They claimed that human ships had appeared from nowhere, moving in formations that violated basic physics. The humans had not attacked the cruiser directly. Instead, they had somehow convinced the entire crew to abandon their posts and flee. The Vorthan captain kept repeating the same phrase: "They do not fight like any species should fight. They fight like they have already accepted death." Hana paused in her reading. That phrase echoed something the informant had told her about humans becoming monsters when necessary. But what kind of tactics could terrify experienced Vorthan warriors into abandoning their own ships? The next file provided part of the answer. It was a tactical analysis prepared by a council military strategist who had been trying to understand the new phase of the war. Standard military doctrine across all known species follows predictable patterns. Fleets engage at maximum range using their most powerful weapons. First, damaged ships retreat to repair and regroup. Civilian populations and non-military targets are avoided to prevent escalation. The human forces appear to have abandoned all of these principles. Their ships attack, at close range, often ramming enemy vessels. Their damaged ships do not retreat but instead seem to seek out opportunities for suicide attacks. Most disturbing, they show no distinction between military and civilian targets. This explains the Vorthan. Psychological reports. Their military culture is based on honor codes that have governed warfare for millennia. They expect their enemies to follow similar rules. When faced with opponents who ignore these conventions entirely, they experience what their own psychologists describe as existential terror. Hana felt sick as she read the implications. Human forces were using tactics that amounted to organized insanity, deliberately breaking every rule of civilized warfare the Vorthan had conquered. Hundreds of worlds using proven strategies, but they had never faced an enemy who refused to play by any rules at all. The final intelligence report in the collection was dated just weeks before the Vorthan withdrawal. It came from a council observer who had witnessed the last major engagement of the war. The human fleet emerged from the asteroid field near Titan, moving in a formation I can only describe as predatory. They were not attempting to achieve any recognizable military objective. Instead, they seemed focused on inflicting maximum psychological damage on Vorthan forces. Vorthan ships that attempted to retreat were hunted down and destroyed. Vorthan ships that attempted to surrender were ignored and attacked anyway. The humans appeared to be sending a message that no Vorthan vessel would be allowed to leave the battlefield alive. Most shocking was the behavior of Admiral Tae-min himself. When his flagship was severely damaged and should have withdrawn from combat, he instead rammed it directly into the Vorthan command ship. Both vessels were destroyed, but the admiral had transmitted a message on all frequencies moments before impact. The message was simple: we do not surrender, we do not retreat, we do not allow our enemies to do either. The Vorthan fleet retreated from the system within hours, abandoning their invasion plans and returning to their home territory. They have made no aggressive moves since that battle. Hana leaned back in her chair, her mind reeling from what she had read. Admiral Tae-min had not just won a military victory. He had broken the enemy psychologically by showing them what humans were capable of when they abandoned all limits, all restraints, all concepts of acceptable behavior. But the most chilling realization was that these tactics had worked. The mighty Vorthan Empire had been reduced to a traumatized shadow of its former self, not through superior technology or numbers, but through pure psychological warfare. Now she understood why the council had banned Tae-min's name from their records. They were not just afraid of what he had done. They were afraid of what other humans might do if they learned that such methods were possible. The war files painted a picture of humanity that contradicted everything the galaxy believed about them. Humans were not just another species with different cultural habits. They were something fundamentally alien, something that could not be predicted or controlled using normal methods. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species were still wondering what humans were really thinking, what they were really capable of, what they might do next if pushed too far. Admiral Tae-min had become exactly what the council feared most, a reminder that some species could not be contained by treaties or traditions. Some species had to be watched very carefully because they might decide that the established order was not worth preserving. Captain Hana spent 3 days analyzing the intelligence files before she found what she was looking for, buried in the deepest folders, a single document that made her blood run cold. It was a witness testimony from a Vorthon survivor of what the files called the Titan incident. The testimony had been recorded by council interrogators but never included in any official report. The witness was Communications Officer Vex Korath of the Vorthon flagship Eternal Dominion. His account was the only detailed record of the final battle that had ended the Vorthon invasion. His words painted a picture of horror that explained why an entire empire had chosen retreat over continued warfare. The human fleet appeared without warning, emerging from the gas cloud surrounding the moon Titan. Our sensors had detected nothing until they were almost within weapons range. This should have been impossible. Our detection systems were superior to anything the Council possessed. But what shocked us was not their stealth technology. It was their formation. They were not arranged in any recognizable battle pattern. Instead, they moved like a pack of hunting animals, each ship positioned to support the others in ways that made no tactical sense according to our military doctrine. Admiral Taemin vessel was at the center of the formation. It was not the largest ship in the human fleet, but it radiated an aura of menace that our psychological warfare specialists had never encountered. The ship itself seemed to be broadcasting a message of pure aggression. When the battle began, we expected the humans to follow standard engagement protocols, opening with long-range missile strikes followed by coordinated fleet maneuvers designed to minimize casualties while maximizing tactical advantage. Instead, they did something that violated every principle of space warfare. They accelerated directly toward our ships at maximum speed, making no attempt to maintain formation or protect their flanks. It was as if each human vessel was operating independently, with only one goal: to get as close as possible to Vorthon ships. Our tactical computers could not predict their movements, because they were not trying to achieve victory in any conventional sense. They were trying to ensure that we could not achieve victory either. Every human ship that was damaged or destroyed took at least one Vorthon vessel with it. The most terrifying moment came when a human destroyer was crippled by our main batteries. Instead of attempting to retreat or surrender, the crew overloaded their reactor and rammed our heavy cruiser Honor of the Empire. Both ships were destroyed in the explosion, but the human action served no strategic purpose except to deny us a victory. This pattern repeated throughout the battle. Human ships that should have withdrawn continued fighting until they were completely destroyed. Human crews that should have evacuated stayed at their posts, ensuring maximum damage to our forces. Even when we offered terms of surrender, they ignored us completely. But the worst part was Admiral Taemin himself. When his flagship was surrounded by 3 of our best warships, he opened a communication channel. His message was broadcast to every ship in both fleets. You came to our space expecting us to surrender like every other species you have conquered, but we are not like other species. We do not calculate acceptable losses or negotiate terms of defeat. We fight until there is nothing left to fight with, and then we keep fighting. The Admiral paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a coldness that made our bridge crew step back from their stations. You wanted to know what makes humans different from every other species in the galaxy. We do not fight to win. We fight to make sure you lose. There is a difference. What happened next defied all military logic. The human flagship was heavily damaged and should have been seeking to escape. Instead, Admiral Taemin ordered a ramming attack against our command ship. The Eternal Dominion, our captain, tried to maneuver away, but the human vessel matched our every move as if they had anticipated our tactical responses. The Admiral had somehow calculated exactly how we would try to escape and positioned his ship to make escape impossible. In the final moments before impact, Admiral Taemin transmitted one last message to our fleet. Tell your empire that humanity sends its regards. Tell them that we remember every world you conquered, every species you enslaved, every time you proved that might makes right. Tell them that we are coming for all of you. The collision destroyed both ships, but the psychological impact on our remaining forces was complete. Our fleet commanders ordered immediate withdrawal, not because we lacked the firepower to continue, but because we had encountered something that could not be defeated using conventional methods. The humans had shown us that they possessed a weapon more dangerous than any technology. They had the ability to choose mutual destruction over defeat. They could make victory so costly that it became indistinguishable from defeat. Hana read the testimony 3 more times, trying to process what she had learned. Admiral Tae-min had not just won a battle. He had demonstrated that humans were capable of something that no other species could comprehend: the willingness to destroy themselves rather than accept defeat. But there was more to the story. The witness testimony included details about what happened after the battle when Vorthan boarding parties had tried to capture surviving human crew members. The human prisoners were unlike any we had encountered before. Most species, when captured, attempt to bargain for their lives or provide information in exchange for better treatment. The humans did neither. They sat in their holding cells and stared at us with expressions that made our guards uncomfortable. One of our interrogation specialists described it as looking into the eyes of beings who had already accepted death and found it acceptable. When we questioned them about their tactics, they gave us answers that made no sense from a military perspective. They claimed they had not been trying to win the battle. They had been trying to teach us a lesson about what happened when you threatened something they cared about. The most disturbing interview was with a human fighter pilot whose ship had been damaged in the battle. When asked why he had continued attacking, even after his weapons were destroyed, he looked at our interrogator and said, "Because you needed to understand that we are not like you. We do not have limits that you can calculate or boundaries that you can predict. If you push us, we will push back until one of us is completely destroyed. And we are very good at making sure it is not us." The pilot paused and smiled in a way that made our entire interrogation team uncomfortable. The problem with conquering the galaxy, one species at a time, is that eventually you meet a species that refuses to be conquered. We are that species. Hana closed the file and sat in silence for a long time. The Titan incident had not been a military engagement. It had been a demonstration. A carefully planned lesson designed to show the Vorthan Empire exactly what they were dealing with when they threatened humanity. Admiral Tae-min had sacrificed his entire fleet and his own life, not to achieve a tactical victory, but to send a message that would echo through Vorthan culture for generations. The message was simple: humans could not be conquered because they would rather die than submit. But the most frightening part was that the demonstration had worked. The Vorthan Empire had retreated, not because they lacked the strength to continue, but because they had realized that victory against humanity would require them to destroy themselves in the process. Now Hana understood why the Council had erased Tae-min from history. They were not just protecting the galaxy from the knowledge of what he had done. They were protecting humanity from the knowledge of what they were capable of if other humans learned about the Titan incident, if they understood that their species possessed this terrible ability to choose mutual destruction over defeat. They might start to question why they had accepted such a subordinate role in galactic politics. The banned admiral had not just won a war. He had revealed a truth about human nature that was too dangerous for anyone to remember. Captain Hana sat in her quarters surrounded by classified documents, intelligence reports, and witness testimonies that painted a picture of humanity that she had never imagined. For weeks, she had been piecing together the truth about Admiral Tae-min and the Titan incident. Now she finally understood why the Council had gone to such extreme lengths to erase one human from galactic history. The complete story was both simpler and more terrifying than she had expected. Admiral Tae-min had not committed war crimes or violated interstellar law. He had done something far worse. He had revealed that humans were fundamentally different from every other intelligent species in the galaxy. While other species fought wars to achieve political objectives or territorial gains, humans fought wars to ensure their enemies could never threaten them again. Other species calculated acceptable losses and negotiated when victory became too costly. Humans simply refused to lose regardless of the price. This difference had not been apparent during peacetime, when humans seemed like eager junior partners in the galactic community, willing to learn and follow established protocols. But when pushed to their limits, when faced with existential threats, humans had shown capabilities that made them impossible to predict or control. The Council had faced an impossible choice after the Vorthan War. They could acknowledge what Admiral Tae-min had accomplished and risk destabilizing the entire galactic power structure, Or they could erase the truth and hope that humanity would never again be pushed to demonstrate their true nature. They had chosen erasure, but not out of malice, out of fear that ran deeper than species prejudice or political calculation. They were afraid that if the galaxy knew what humans were capable of when cornered, the careful balance of power that maintained interstellar peace would collapse. But Hana realized there was another layer to their decision. The Council had not just been afraid of humanity, enemies learning the truth. They had been afraid of humanity itself. If humans understood what they had accomplished during the war, if they knew how much fear they had instilled in the galaxy, most powerful empire, they might start asking uncomfortable questions. Why had humans accepted such junior roles in council politics? Why did they allow other species to make decisions about human colonies and trade routes? Why did they defer to alien judgment on matters affecting human lives? The answer was that the Council had deliberately kept humanity ignorant of their own power. They had created a false history that portrayed humans as brave but conventional allies, good soldiers who followed orders and worked. Well within established hierarchies, Admiral Tae-min had threatened this carefully constructed narrative, not through rebellion or political activism, but by demonstrating what humans became when they stopped following other species' rules. He had shown that humanity did not need the Council protection or guidance. They had their own methods of dealing with threats. Hana opened her personal log and began recording her thoughts. She knew that what she had discovered would change everything, but she also knew that revealing the truth would come with consequences that reached far beyond her own life. Personal log. Captain Hana Day 127 of Investigation. I have uncovered the truth about Admiral Tae-min and the events that led to his name being banned from council records. The reality is both more complex and more dangerous than I initially believed. Admiral Tae-min was erased from history, not because he was a monster, but because he was too human. He demonstrated capabilities that revealed the fundamental difference between humanity and every other species in the galaxy. While other species have limits that can be calculated and boundaries that can be negotiated, humans have something else entirely. They have the ability to choose mutual destruction over defeat. They can make victory so costly that it becomes meaningless. They fight not to win, but to ensure their enemies lose. This is not tactics or strategy. It is something deeper. A species-wide psychological trait that makes humans unpredictable and ultimately uncontrollable. The Council decision to erase Admiral Tae-min was not censorship. It was damage control. They recognized that if this truth became widely known, it would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Every species would be forced to reconsider their relationship with humanity. Every alliance and treaty would need to be renegotiated, but there is a deeper problem. The Council has kept humanity ignorant of their own nature. For 50 years, they have created a false identity for humans as junior partners in the galactic community. This deception has worked only because humans have not been pushed to their limits since the Vorthon War. What happens when that changes? What happens when humanity faces another existential threat and rediscovers what they are capable of? Will they be content to remain junior partners in a system that has deliberately kept them powerless? Hana paused her recording and stared out at the stars visible through her cabin window. She was facing the same choice that had haunted the Council for 5 decades. What do you do with a truth too dangerous to tell? If she revealed her findings, she would expose a conspiracy that had shaped galactic politics for generations. The revelation would likely trigger a crisis that could destabilize interstellar relations. But if she remained silent, she would be complicit in keeping humanity ignorant of their own history and capabilities. There was also a personal consideration. Hana was not just a researcher. She was a human being who had spent her entire life believing she was part of a species that needed guidance and protection from older, wiser civilizations. Now she knew that was a lie. Her own people had capabilities that terrified the galaxy's most powerful forces. The weight of that knowledge was almost unbearable. She understood now why the Council had chosen erasure over truth. Some revelations were too large for individuals to carry, some secrets were too dangerous for societies to bear. But as she sat in the darkness of space surrounded by evidence of her species' hidden strength, Hana made her decision. She could not carry this truth alone. and she could not allow the lie to continue unchallenged. Admiral Tae-min had sacrificed everything to show the galaxy what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. The least she could do was ensure that his sacrifice was not forgotten, that the truth he had died to reveal would finally be acknowledged. She opened a new file and began typing her official report, knowing that once she transmitted it, there would be no going back. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was not what they appeared to be, and humanity was about to learn that they had never needed anyone protection. The ghost of Admiral Tae-min had waited 50 years for someone to tell his story. Captain Hana was finally ready to let him speak as she prepared to transmit her findings. To every major news network in council space, she realized that she was about to become part of the same legend that had inspired her investigation. The truth about human nature was too powerful to contain and too important to suppress. The galaxy was about to discover that some species could not be controlled by rules or treaties. Some species had to be respected for what they truly were, and humanity was about to discover that they had never been as powerless as they had been led to believe. Admiral Tae-min's legacy was about to reshape the galaxy once again.